Good morning from the Freedom of Information and Privacy Association. I'm Patrick Farnsworth. This is your Access and Privacy Online News Summary for Saturday, July 18th. This week, FIPA calls for stronger federal privacy law. Provinces narrow access to records. AI expansion tests energy, consent, and political accountability. And U.S. investigations raise new concerns for public records and press freedom. Let's dive in. First, we have a few updates from FIPA and our extended network to note. FIPA recently submitted its response to the Treasury Board's 2026 review of the Privacy Act, arguing that modernization must remain rights-based. The submission was assembled by 2026 UVic Law Co-op legal researcher Sarah Matika, with input from the BC Civil Liberties Association, the First Nations Information Governance Centre, the Canadian Union of Public Employees, and Dr. Teresa Scassa. The Treasury Board's review outlined 23 policy proposals built around 6 themes: integrated services, accountability and transparency, safeguards for sensitive data, privacy and trust, Indigenous peoples' access to and protection of their data, and compliance. Many of these proposals could move important privacy safeguards from policy into law, including privacy impact assessments and breach notification requirements. FIPA supports several of these directions. However, meaningful safeguards for broader collection, sharing, or automated processing of personal information must be put into place, especially concerning proposals that would enable data sharing between government bodies without consent, and about the use of artificial intelligence and automated decision systems to process personal information and make decisions about people. FIPA's 12 recommendations include proportionality tests for data collection and AI, public written agreements for government data sharing, legally defined privacy impact assessments, mandatory breach notification, meaningful consultation with Indigenous peoples, and enforcement consent, including a right to withdraw it. FIPA also calls for clearer workplace monitoring rights and privacy rules for parliamentary offices. The through line is simple. New technology should increase accountability, not reduce it. We'll have commentary to review this submission in the near future. Plus, someone familiar with FIPA, and we hope our listeners, Kevin Walby, a professor of criminal justice at the University of Winnipeg, writing in the conversation, warns that access to information rights are being narrowed across the country. Walby draws attention to recent erosions, including moves in Alberta creating broad protections for communications involving political staff, Ontario excluding records held by the Premier, ministers, parliamentary assistants, and their staff, including requests already underway, and British Columbia expanding the grounds for delaying or rejecting requests while changing the duty to respond from without delay to without reasonable delay. Ottawa is also considering whether emails and meeting notes without defined, quote, business value should count as official records. Each change may look technical. Together, they reduce one of the public's few tools for seeing how decisions are made and money is spent. This also makes it more difficult for journalists to conduct investigations, activists to confront social issues, and citizens to hold governments accountable. FIPA and others have long argued that without transparency, the ability to make a fully autonomous and informed vote is in jeopardy. A second conversation analysis from multiple academic authors at McMaster University and the University of British Columbia asks research ethics boards to recognize a quieter form of harm: being left out. Ethics review is essential for protecting people from privacy breaches, coercion, and exploitation, but rules can become so restrictive that newcomers, Indigenous peoples, racialized communities, and pregnant women are excluded from studies that shape health policy and care. When those communities are missing from the evidence, their needs can be overlooked and resources can be misdirected, which means effective interventions cannot be developed. This contributes to inequities in prevention, diagnosis, and treatment. The authors argue that the answer is not weaker oversight. It is better, more participatory research, including Indigenous data governance, community representation, and a serious assessment of the harm caused when needed research is delayed or never done. The authors argue this also includes that making an exclusion of a specific group itself is an ethical failure, similar to the impacts of exploitation. And as multiple federal bills make proposed changes to Canada's information and regulatory scheme, the Canadian Press examines Ottawa's plan for a new Digital Safety and Data Protection Commission that is expected to take 18 months to set up. Under Bills C-34 and C-36, a 5-member commission appointed by Cabinet would enforce online safety rules and private sector privacy law. It could issue binding orders and levy fines of up to $10 million or 3% of global revenue, rising to $25 million or 5% for the most serious offenses. The regulator will also make decisions about important elements of how to implement the new digital safety rules. That includes deciding whether age verification methods used by companies are effective and respect people's privacy, and whether social media platforms qualify for exemptions to the age ban. Supporters say one powerful regulator could give Canadians a clear place to take concerns about children's safety, data, and large technology companies. Critics warn that moving private sector privacy oversight, which includes tech companies, away from the independent privacy commissioner could waste decades of expertise, create a difficult transition, and give government more influence over regulatory direction. The key question is not only whether Canada needs stronger digital oversight, it is how to build it without weakening independence or privacy rights along the way. Next, we'll be moving east to west across the country with news stories informed by or impacting access to information. LGI reporter Natalie Sturgeon at the St. Croix Courier reports that St. Andrews residents have now seen 3 options for repairing Market Wharf and Market Square after an earlier tender came in over budget. One option would be to repair the seawall without adding infill. 2 others would modestly expand the square. Engineers are also comparing wood cribbing, precast concrete, and a low-cost hybrid. The assessment identified critical steel pile failures that need attention this year. According to documents obtained through a Right to Information and Protection of Privacy Act request, staff made a request to the Department of Environment and Local Government, ELG, saying it would also like to infill Market Square to create more usable space. On the same day, it requested that the infill be extended by 40 meters. The council faced criticism about that expansion, but also the lack of a visioning exercise. One was completed by Trace, a Moncton-based firm. About 70 people attended the open house, and council has promised more consultation before deciding how the landmark waterfront project moves forward. Natalie Sturgeon also reports that New Brunswick is working to increase local governance skills through training. About 550 councillors and mayors attended 2 days of voluntary municipal training in St. John. The training served as an introduction for both new and returning members. In September 2025, the Local Governance Commission had previously recommended making this type of training mandatory. These sessions covered roles and responsibilities, codes of conduct, conflicts of interest, municipal finance, meeting procedure, and the Right of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. The province says it will publish the names of participants once the full orientation program, including fall sessions, is complete. Next, to a conversation analysis from Assistant Professor Dandeep Sidhu, who argues that recent police scandals in Montreal should be understood as signs of deeper institutional problems, not isolated failures. The article points to recent allegations of racist conduct in Montreal, unauthorized database use, and misconduct cases in several provinces. It includes calls for body cameras, race-based data, and new oversight that can improve transparency, but the authors say those measures will not succeed if police institutions resist external scrutiny or treat reform as a communications exercise. Sidhu, teaching at the Department of Sociology and Criminology at the University of Manitoba, Says to combat this, we mustn't look at and discuss crime as an individual or cultural flaw, but rather as a product of structural forces. Freedom of Information records requests have been crucial in exposing that resistance. The privacy stakes become even clearer in a related Wired investigation into police drones south of the border in San Francisco. Wired reports that a publicly accessible web address accidentally exposed live video from 5 San Francisco Police Department drones. Security researchers Sam Curry and Mike Robert could see color and thermal footage, location data, and identifying information about drone pilots. The feeds showed police tracking vehicles, watching buildings, and monitoring people who appeared unaware that cameras were overhead. The exposure was removed after the researchers reported it. The incident shows two privacy risks at once: broad, pervasive, clandestine aerial surveillance conducted by police forces, and weak security around the resulting data. It also raises a forward looking concern as AI can review far more video at far greater scale than any human operator. Canadian police forces, including the RCMP, have a less than stellar history in early adoption of new technology that erodes privacy and infringes on civil liberties. This article provides a useful reminder of the importance of oversight and what can occur when police forces think no one is watching. Next, LGI reporter Daniel Pittman at AureliaMatters.com reports that Ramara Council has unanimously requested an urgent federal safety review of a water aerodrome on Lake Couchiching. The review would examine flight paths and the effect of commercial seaplane operations on recreational use of the lake. The aerodrome moved this spring to a site about 300 meters from Camp Couchiching, prompting a packed council meeting and a petition with more than 1,500 signatures. Ramara Mayor Basil Clark said that aviation regulation is not municipality jurisdiction, but she said the township understands it is important to residents and the importance of supporting them. The council unanimously voted to form a letter to Transport Canada, the Minister of Transport, Simcoe North MP Adam Chambers, and the Transportation Safety Board of Canada, requesting a review of operational safety as soon as possible during the summer season for the Lake Country Airways water aerodrome. Local residents have also begun filing access requests for the original federal application. Transport Canada said it needed more time to consult third parties, leaving the community waiting for records that could explain how the move was approved. Staying in Ontario, the Canadian Press reports that 37-year-old Alex Shved is challenging the province's refusal to fund specialized cancer treatment outside Canada. His doctor recommended tumor-infiltrating lymphocyte therapy, but Ontario rejected the request because the treatment is still under review for possible public funding. Shved's oncologist requested out-of-country funding for Shved to receive TIL therapy at the Moffitt Cancer Center in Florida, but Shved claims regulations do not mention interim funding periods as a basis for denials. Shved says the brief, formulaic denial did not explain how his individual circumstances were considered. He has appealed, sought judicial review, and filed Freedom of Information requests for internal notes and memos. His broader point is about due process. When government decisions carry life-changing consequences, patients should be able to understand the evidence, policy, and reasoning behind them. In Manitoba, LGI reporter Tahira Noor at New Canadian Media reports that many immigrant women are turning skills and professional experience into home-based businesses after facing barriers in the labor market. Winnipeg entrepreneur Ebedun Etetu created Naija Market Day after struggling to find work that matched her qualifications. The venture has expanded to more than 15 Canadian cities, and a recent event at the Forks brought together nearly 100 vendors. The research lead on labor migration at Canada Excellence Research Chair's Migration said better support is needed to address the systemic barriers faced by immigrant women. This includes easier access to information on funding, training, and networking opportunities, stronger policies to combat labor market discrimination, and more. Researchers say home-based work can offer flexibility, community connection, and renewed agency, but it can also reflect persistent failures to recognize foreign credentials, provide affordable childcare, and match newcomers with work equal to their experience. It was also cautioned that many of the home run businesses operated by immigrant women are informal and remain unregistered, making it difficult to accurately measure their scale and economic impact. Shifting to Alberta, LGI reporter Armand Khanna at the Lakeside Leader reports that the town of Slave Lake is replacing its old recreation subsidy policy with a new leisure economic assistance program, or LEAP. According to the administrative report presented to Council, the primary goal of LEAP is to tear down the financial barriers that often prevent low income households or individuals enduring short term financial trauma from accessing facilities like the Multi Rec Center, or the MRC. The proposed bylaw links eligibility to federal low income measures and offers annual credits ranging from $150 for one person to $800 for larger households. It also allows social workers, school officials, shelter staff, settlement workers, or police to verify need when standard tax documents are unavailable. The policy includes strict confidentiality rules that comply with the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act and an internal appeal process, so sensitive financial records are not debated in open council. It is a practical example of designing access without forcing vulnerable applicants to surrender their dignity or privacy. Shifting to artificial intelligence, access to information records reveal the scale of Canada's data center ambitions. The Canadian press reports that a federal investor deck listed about 337 megawatts of current AI data center capacity and more than 20 gigawatts in projects described as planned or under development. The government says that the number obtained through access to information was only a point in time inventory, and that most proposals will not proceed. A statement from Artificial Intelligence Minister Evan Solomon's office said the minister did not use this deck or cite the 20 GW figure in any external engagements, including with investors or international counterparts. Its national strategy estimates Canada may need about 5.5 gigawatts of commercial AI compute by 2030. The records also show the trade-offs. Much of the proposed capacity is in Alberta and could be powered by natural gas. One federal briefing estimated that 18 gigawatts of gas-backed capacity could add roughly 20 million tons of emissions. Communities are also asking about electricity, water, noise, local benefits, and who the infrastructure is ultimately built to serve. Taking these larger issues to the local level, LGI reporter Armand Khanna at the Lakeside Leader reports that Aspen View Public Schools has adopted detailed rules for artificial intelligence in classrooms. Teachers must review AI-generated material for accuracy, bias, and curriculum fit. New tools require a privacy impact assessment, educational review by the Director of Curriculum and Student Achievement, and checks by information technology and privacy staff. Students may use approved AI for tutoring or study support, but they must acknowledge its use and cannot submit generated work as their own. The strongest privacy rule is direct. Staff and students must not place names, student numbers, photos, voices, health information, learning support data, or other identifying details into public AI systems without explicit approval. To keep these records safe, the Information Technology Department is now in charge of tracking where data goes. The procedure said the department must ensure that all division data is, quote, stored in Canada, or that privacy protections meet the requirements of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act in Alberta, end quote. And while all of this plays out here in Canada, the New York Times reports that nearly 200 economists and technology leaders, including 15 Nobel laureates, have signed a statement urging governments to prepare now for rapid AI-driven economic change. These signatories say more capable systems could raise living standards, but could also displace workers on a scale and timetable that existing policy is not ready to manage. Their appeal is not for a single prediction. It is for better measurement, labor market planning, social protections, and public institutions able to respond before disruption becomes crisis. On the political front, back in Canada, LGI reporter J.P. Anastasiou at the Hamilton Spectator reports that Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has appointed Halaman Norfolk MP Leslyn Lewis as shadow minister for digital government and artificial intelligence. The move comes after the federal Liberals unveiled AI for All, the Carney government strategy to encourage individual Canadians and businesses to adopt AI through investing in training and education meant to increase trust in the new technology. Lewis says AI and other digital technologies are reshaping every aspect of our society, so she will push for innovation that protects privacy, security, digital sovereignty, and fundamental freedoms in a world that's increasingly digital. That commitment will be measured against a separate conservative position. The party has gone to court in support of broad latitude for federal political parties to collect and use voter data, and voted in favor of federal political parties remaining outside the General Privacy Act and the FIPA framework. FIPA argues that this leaves a significant accountability gap. Political parties increasingly use data and AI to target voters, but Canadians still lack the enforceable privacy rights they would have when dealing with many other sectors and organizations. Now to other Canadian privacy developments. The Canadian Press reports on the latest developments from the Nova Scotia Power data breach. Importantly, the power company will restore late fees on October 1st, more than a year after a ransomware attack disrupted billing and exposed personal information belonging to more than 280,000 customers. About 9% of customers are now behind on payments, with an average overdue balance near $1,300, roughly double the pre-attack rate. Late fees can reach 1.5% a month to a maximum of 19.56% per year. The utility says payment plans and additional support are available. Nova Scotia Power announced the creation of a new $500,000 program that will see the utility match funds for low-income customers who are receiving financial help from a charity or other organization. There's also an existing program to waive late fees for low-income customers receiving financial support, which has been extended for another 18 months. The attack exposed information including credit card and social insurance numbers. The company later agreed to delete the SINs it held, underscoring a basic and fundamental privacy lesson. Information that is not necessary and is not collected cannot be breached if unlawful access is gained. Staying on the East Coast, LGI reporter Adam McNamara at the Victoria Reporter reports that applications are open for Nova Scotia's property tax rebate for seniors. At the same time, the province is warning about scams that imitate government benefit programs. Officials say they will never email, text, or call residents to request banking details or social insurance numbers. Applicants should use official forms through Access Nova Scotia, MLA offices, or the province's established channels. In this program, eligible homeowners can receive 50% of the municipal residential property tax they paid for in 2025, up to $800, with applications due by December 31st. All the amounts listed on tax bills are eligible to be included in the rebate calculation, except amounts for commercial property, resource property, and municipal exemptions or rebates. In local reporting or national legislative changes, LGI reporter Jacqueline St. Pierre at the Manitoulin Expositor examines Ottawa's expanding lawful access proposals and the line between modern investigation and routine surveillance. The measures under discussion include subscriber information orders, confirmation of service demands, expanded cross-border requests, and wider cooperation involving the RCMP and Canada Border Services Agency. Police say digital evidence moves quickly and that investigators need tools suited to encrypted global networks. Supporters say criminal networks already operate with machine speed coordination, financial fraud, cyber intrusions, trafficking networks, and terrorism financing do not wait for paper processes. If law enforcement is constrained to analog-era tools, they argue, it cedes the field by default. On the other side, advocates answer that metadata and subscriber information can reveal deeply personal patterns. They point to charter protections and Supreme Court decisions recognizing privacy in online identity. Privacy commissioners, both federal and provincial, have repeatedly flagged concerns about scope creep. The core issue remains cumulative. Each power may appear narrow, but together they can build an infrastructure where more people are visible to the state more of the time. In local accountability news, LGI reporter Christian Collington at the FIPA.ca reports that Halton Hills is developing a formal whistleblower program for municipal employees. The proposed model would use an independent provider to receive and investigate anonymous reports through secure, round the clock web, email, phone, and form based channels. The program would focus on fraud, wrongdoing, and waste. The external provider would investigate any anonymous complaints received and pass recommendations back to senior management. The committee, consisting of the Chief Administrative Officer, Human Resources Director, Legal Counsel, and affected department heads, would then deliberate on those findings to determine any necessary outcomes or structural changes. Staff estimate a $10,000 startup cost and about $20,000 a year to operate it. Funding will be considered in the 2027 budget. The design details are significant. Employees need confidentiality, independence, and protection from retaliation if a reporting system is to produce credible accountability. Jumping to Alberta, LGI reporter Brett McKay at the Investigative Journalism Foundation reports that Alberta's new vetting rules for school materials and outside presenters are creating uncertainty well beyond the government's stated targets about which topics are out of bounds. Programs involving human sexuality, sexual orientation, or gender identity must receive provincial approval. The result, according to educators and community groups, is that some child abuse prevention programming and dedicated 2S LGBTQ+ anti-discrimination support have been delayed or blocked, while no outside groups are approved to present to the youngest grades. Calgary Communities Against Sexual Abuse, CCASA, has even enlisted consultants from the government relations firm Signal Hill to advocate for greater clarity on permissible materials, quote, to safeguard critical child protection initiatives and/or programs, end quote, according to Alberta's lobbyist registry. CCASA identified 3 policies creating uncertainty for its educators: Bill 25, an act to remove politics and ideology from classrooms, the Ministerial Order on Library Materials, and the K-12 Curriculum Review. The access and privacy concern is procedural. When approval criteria are unclear, essential programs can disappear without a transparent decision, timeline, or effective route for review or alternative. LGI reporter Brooke Wagner at the Medicine Hat News reports that Red Deer RCMP have launched Canada's first drone as first responder program. During weekday daytime hours, remotely piloted drones can be sent from 2 detachments before officers reach a call. Police say the live view helps confirm threats, track a fleeing suspect, and send the right resources. Pilots can also remain on the phone with the person who called for help. In the program's first week, a drone was sent to an assault complaint where the suspect ran on foot. The pilot was quickly able to track the suspect from the air, and RCMP say the arrest was made safely. Red Deer RCMP have flown drones since 2020 under a separate program called Remotely Piloted Aircraft Systems, or RPAS. Those drones are carried to scenes by officers. RCMP say RPAS will keep running alongside the DFR program. The RCMP says the drones will not be used for random surveillance and that flights require lawful authority. As the program expands, the public will need clear policies on activation, notice, retention, access, audit logs, and secondary use of footage, not only assurances that the technology will be used responsibly. Given the recent reports in Wired and the RCMP's less than stellar privacy record, we look forward to the policies being readily available without undue delay, with appropriate monitoring and oversight to ensure the RCMP are saying what they do, doing what they say, and proving it. Next, in British Columbia, LGI reporter Michelle Gamage at the Tyee reports that people subjected to birth alerts in British Columbia can now apply for compensation under a proposed $66 million settlement. From 1980 to 2019, child welfare authorities could notify hospitals before a birth, flagging the child as potentially needing protection after delivery, often without telling the parent. Indigenous women were disproportionately affected. About 3,000 people have been identified in electronic records, and lawyers believe older paper files may reveal more. The Supreme Court of Canada will determine if the BC settlement is fair and should be approved at a hearing scheduled for December 4th, 2026. Eligible class members have until December 4th, 2027 to apply. Other class action lawsuits about birth alerts are still unfolding in Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan. The proposed payment is about $2,000 with additional compensation for Indigenous class members. The settlement focuses on the privacy and information sharing harm caused by the alert itself and still requires court approval. Now to our full international segment. In the United States, the Associated Press obtained police body camera video showing Nevada Governor Joe Lombardo being stopped for an alleged traffic violation and released without a ticket after identifying himself. The encounter lasted only seconds. Police did not explain why no citation was issued, while a police union and ethics advisors said police commonly give warnings for minor violations and denied that the governor received special treatment. The president of the Las Vegas Police Protective Association said that as Lombardo is the former sheriff, odds are he doesn't have warrants, does not have a suspended driver's license, and so there's no need to run him. A deputy sheriff and policy advisor who teaches an ethics and policing class in California also said there is nothing unethical about what the governor or the officer did. The larger point is the role of records. Without the public records request, voters would not have seen the interaction or been able to judge the competing explanations for themselves. The AP and Marfa Public Radio report that a local developmental district sued the Trump administration over plans to build a border wall through the Big Bend region of Texas, arguing that work on a flood control levee required federal engineering review. DHS previously waived a slew of environmental, cultural resource protections and contracting laws to expedite construction of the border wall in the Big Bend region, but it didn't initially include that 1899 law in its waiver. 2 weeks later, the Department of Homeland Security added the Rivers and Harbors Act of 1899, the law at the center of the lawsuit, to a broader waiver for the project. The plaintiffs say that sidesteps the safety process without answering the flood risk. The government says Congress gave Homeland Security wide authority to waive legal requirements for border construction and is asking the court to reject an injunction. Communications between border agencies obtained by Marfa Public Radio through a Freedom of Information Act request show in-depth discussions about the project between the federal agencies had not yet occurred as of late March, even after construction contracts had been awarded. The case is a stark example of executive power changing the legal terrain while a challenge is already underway. In Michigan, the AP reports that Paige Shiver, a former University of Michigan executive assistant, is suing the public university over repeated denials of Freedom of Information requests. Her lawyers sought records connected to an internal misconduct matter and the investigation that led to former football coach Sharon Moore's firing. They argue that the university cannot spend millions on an outside investigation and then withhold the findings from the person at the center of the case. Moore was accused of confronting Shiver, with whom he had been having an affair, and blaming her for his firing. Authorities said she had previously ended the affair and spoken to school officials about it. The university declined to comment. The lawsuit seeks the records and damages and will test how far a public institution can rely on exemptions after commissioning a major internal review. A Cal Matters investigation distributed by the Associated Press examines California's expanding use of so-called Perkins operations, undercover jailhouse stings designed to prompt suspects into discussing a case after arrest. Public records requests uncovered training slides describing a highly organized program, including staged evidence, monitored conversations, and repeated operations for outside agencies. The records reveal Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office established uniform procedures for Perkins operations in February 2017. Defense lawyers and courts have raised concerns about coercion, the right to counsel, and racial disparities. One Riverside County analysis found black defendants were more than 4 times as likely than white defendants to be targeted. Court records from a case filed before the California Supreme Court this year show that 85 out of 400 murder convictions involving Perkins operations in Los Angeles County occurred after a suspect had invoked their Miranda rights. That accounting was from just one of several units within the office, suggesting the number is likely much higher, according to the records. Prosecutors say the technique can be lawful and valuable when carefully controlled. The records show why those controls, discovery obligations, and independent review cannot be optional. Next, the former Epoch Times chief financial officer Weidong Bill Guan has pled guilty during jury selection to conspiracy in a $67 million money laundering scheme. Prosecutors say fraud proceeds, including unemployment benefits, were moved through company-related bank and cryptocurrency accounts. Stolen personal information was allegedly used to open accounts that helped move the money. Guan acknowledged that he suspected the funds were linked to crime and chose not to investigate further. A prosecutor told the judge that a trial would have included testimony from current and former Epoch Times employees, along with cryptocurrency records and hundreds of emails and text messages, including some in which Guan misled banks about the nature of the income going through various accounts. He faces a potential sentence of up to 10 years. Prosecutors say the case is unrelated to the media company's news-gathering work, and no sentencing date has been set. In a major press freedom development, the Associated Press reports that the U.S. Justice Department has subpoenaed 4 New York Times journalists after stories about security concerns involving a Qatari-gifted Air Force One aircraft. The newspaper says the FBI had asked it to delay publication and identify confidential sources. The Times refused. Some subpoenas were later delivered to reporters at their homes, seeking testimony before a federal grand jury. The White House did not answer messages seeking comment about the subpoenas of the Times journalists. The senior attorney for the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression said the subpoenas and the prospect of bringing reporters before grand juries sends a chilling message to journalists and whistleblowers alike. Watch what you say, or expect a knock on the door. The Justice Department says the reporters are not targets and that investigators are seeking the people who leaked classified information. Press freedom groups say compelling journalists to testify should be a last resort because source protection is essential to reporting on government conduct. Also in Washington, Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse has released whistleblower allegations of rushed construction, contracting failures, and waste at the Kennedy Center. The disclosure, submitted through the Government Accountability Project, includes accounts from former project managers and an 83-page appendix of internal emails, documents, and photographs. The allegations include work begun before congressional authorization, no-bid contracting, and expensive changes driven by appearance rather than need. White House has asked the center's leadership to respond by July 23rd. The Kennedy Center did not immediately comment. Trump seized control of the arts and culture venue named after former President John F. Kennedy at the beginning of his second term. Trump ousted the center's prior leadership and replaced it with a board of trustees that named him as chairman and added his name to the building. Democrats sued to remove it, and a federal judge ruled Trump's name must come off the venue, which had been racked with boycotts by artists during the turmoil. The episode shows why protected internal reporting and access to supporting records are essential when public institutions spend public money. And now to an international story with a more serious turn. The Associated Press reports that Britain's legal regulator has upheld the suspension of International Criminal Court Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan, while disciplinary proceedings examine serious misconduct allegations involving a former aide. Khan has denied wrongdoing, and the court's oversight body is expected to consider his removal later this month. At the same time, the Trump administration has announced a wider campaign to pressure the ICC, including sanctions, travel restrictions, and calls for member states to reject its authority over U.S. citizens. Typically reserved for autocrats and crime bosses, sanctions can be devastating. They prevent the ICC officials and their families from entering the U.S., block their access to even basic financial services, and extend to the minutiae of their everyday lives. The European Union says it is exploring diplomatic, legal, and financial support for the court. The ICC was created to be a last resort for pursuing the most serious international crimes: war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and aggression. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced that the U.S. was launching a, quote, sweeping campaign to dismantle the threat posed by the International Criminal Court to U.S. sovereignty, end quote. The two issues are distinct but simultaneous: internal accountability for the prosecutor and external pressure that could weaken an institution responsible for investigating the world's gravest crimes. Thank you for spending part of your weekend with us. We hope today's stories helped you stay informed about privacy, information management, access to records, and public accountability. Please subscribe wherever you listen. You can also support the Freedom of Information and Privacy Association through FIPA News Monitoring, or by making a donation. Both help us keep this work going and the microphones on. This episode was written by Sean Fisk. Original music was composed by Breakmaster Cylinder. I'm Patrick Farnsworth, your host and producer. A warm FIPA thank you to all the reporters, outlets, researchers, and community members whose work makes this podcast possible, and to you for listening. Stay safe and stay informed.